Good question. Anyone want to take that, Mr.
I've been
Crump?
asked this often on Fox News and the programs. I think it was very disrespectful not only to the mayor, but more disrespectful to the families who invited the mayor to the funeral to make it a political issue while they were paying their last respects to these officers. And we have to remember, they want everybody else to respect them when they act a certain way and do certain things. So why would they disrespect the mayor for, let's face it, talking about race? He has a biracial son who more than likely, if he's stopped by the police, is going to have a different experience than a Caucasian teenager. And so he talked to his son about that, and he had a public discourse about that, and they seem to be offended by that, which doesn't make sense. We can't say that every time we acknowledge that black people are being profiled, that means we're against all police. We are not against police. We're against police excessive force and police brutality. We're against bad police. We are really for good police. And we keep saying that over and over again, but when we speak up for our children in our community, everybody say, oh, you've been anti-police. We got to say, okay, media, if you're going to report it that way, report it accurately, that we are talking about bad police officers. And so I hope I answered your question. Race matters. Let's don't say that race doesn't matter. I'm officer of the court. We go in the courtroom every day and we see these things play out over and over again. The same exact fact pattern with little white boys and little black boys. The little white boys go home, the little black boys go to jail. Race matters, and we have to get beyond that, and that's why I think it's transparency is the key.
All right.
No more grand juries. Let's have a trial that everybody can see and see that it works fairly.
We're getting a lot of responses from our audience. Great questions from our audience, incidentally, and thanks so much for sticking around. Right now, we wish to check back in again with Jumi Alabanji in our newsroom. Jumi, what are you hearing from coast to coast on social media?
Well, we're still going through all those questions, Jeff. This is one of our first questions directly to one of our panelists. This one for Dr. Carson from Jonathan A. Thomas. He asked a question, had this been your administration over the past 6 years, what would you have done differently? So that's a question for Dr. Carson. We've also got another question from one of our viewers across the country.
My name is Legarian Thomas, and I'm from Detroit, Michigan. And my question was, why do you think there is such a strong increase of racial tension in the United States of America?
Okay, so there you go. We've got the one question for the entire panel. Why do you think there's such a strong racial tension in the country? And also this question right here for Dr. Carson. What would you have done differently if this was your administration? Back to you, Jeff.
Wow, that is a general question to say the least. Jumi, thank you very much. Dr. Benjamin Carson, you're elected President of the United States, 2008. What would you have done differently?
Both of those questions fit well into one answer. I think it's where you place the emphasis. And I think I would be placing a great deal more emphasis on how we are the same and not how we are different, and trying to promote programs that allow us to understand that. That's what I would do, and I think it would make a huge difference. And it starts at the top. And what kind of atmosphere do you create? Do you create one where you emphasize the unfairness and the tension, or do you create one where you emphasize the opportunity and how we can increase that?
All right, this next question goes to Patricia Guadalupe. How have you felt about President Barack Obama's performance since being elected president in 2008?
Well, overall, I think that to say that race has, that we've gone beyond race and elected an African-American president, and that's great, without really thinking about, he's been the president who's received more death threats than anybody else. Then there were social media. The big negative part of social media is that you have a lot of trolls out there who hide behind a lot the anonymity of being online to criticize, and not just criticize, but go after the president in a way that no one else would tolerate it, that we wouldn't tolerate that from anybody else. And so I think that, when you have a a president who was elected in a historic way that he was, and then you have a Congress that says, well, the first thing I'm going to make sure to do is to make sure that you're a one-term president. When you go into that environment and you have people on social media not liking it, because there are people out there, let's be honest, who just don't like that, the fact that there is a black president. When you combine all those things together, then you see that the White House has done some things wrong, but it's also been an uphill battle for them because they're dealing with people that just don't like the idea that he is a black man.
Nonetheless, Barack Obama will go down in U.S. history eternally as the first African-American president we've ever had. Fred, how do you feel about President Barack Obama's performance so far? And then we're going to get an audience question.
To be honest, it's gone pretty much the way I expected it to go. As you stated, it's been an uphill battle with the situation that, well, the state that the country was in when he was elected, all the problems we had, all the, the difficulties faced. And, he kind of came in with the attitude of, okay, the status quo is how we got here, so maybe we should do some things differently. Got a lot of opposition for that. Again, elephant in the room, is it just because he wants to be different, or is it simply because we don't want to follow a black man? However you look at that, again, elephant in the room, we can talk about it, we can not talk about it. But like I said, I expected him to come in, identify problems, try to tackle them in a different way than what we've done in the past, and get a lot of opposition for it, and that's kind of what's happened.
The only way to get this done is to talk about it, whether it's ugly, whether it's bad, whether it's contentious, whether it's a lively debate. The only way we can overcome this and at least go forward is to talk about it. And speaking of talking about it, we have another cup of coffee guy here waiting for his turn to ask a question. What is your name, sir?
I'm William Ogborn from Cape Girardeau, Missouri.
All right, and what is your...
Well, this is probably would be more to the producers, but it seems a little bit disingenuous to have a conversation on race without having a white representative here so that we can actually have a conversation. It would be just the same if you turn on Fox News and you see 3 old white guys talking at people. And that, it doesn't mean that you guys are talking at people at all. It just means that as a viewer, people seem to see that as, hey, it's just these guys talking at me, so it doesn't become internal. When you have a surrogate out there, it can start to internalize that. And it seems we need to have these conversations on race with all members present. That means Asian, that means upper class white, that means lower class white, that means blacks from all walks of life, that means Hispanics from all walks of life. You can't have it just be upper class white guys, upper class black guys, middle class anything. You need all that together. So what do you think would be the difference here if we could actually talk to somebody almost as pasty white as I am? But,
I believe if we get a 2-shot here real quick.
I know. That's pretty close.
I don't know, man. I think I'm pastier than you. I don't know. We're close.
You got a little tent there.
So. You know what, though? Can I say something? And you bring up a very good point. But, these town halls will continue.
Right.
As we were talking about the younger people showing up. I'd like a law enforcement agent to come up there and tell us about the legal system, or maybe someone from the judicial community, to find out exactly how the grand jury system works in this state. The grand jury system works in this state. Because there's a lot of Americans going, how the heck can they come up with that decision? That makes no sense. So
not only
these
that,
will continue, and we will have that.
Not only that, but Mr. Crump could also be able to talk to somebody that's representing the police force that actually did not realize some of the things that Mr. Crump was talking about. And so that opens up that dialogue. That's how you begin to change hearts and minds right there, is by having that person that represents each person in America that they can identify with, and then have that person kind of speaking their views to see, hey, wait, that's the response that nobody ever gave me, because maybe they didn't get outside their community and actually talk to someone of a different color. And that's what happens.
All right. That's a very good point. Anyone want to respond to that? Because there's so many variables that come in under the auspices of racism, whether it be law enforcement, race, income, where you live, inner cities, police officers and their relationships to the community. Anybody jump in first? This is anybody's ball.
I think he makes a great point as far as needing to have more diversity, and as you said, in the future having maybe a law enforcement. But going back to what you said, if somebody's, like say a white family sitting at home and they see all of us up here speaking, one of the main things that we keep going back to is, education, like getting to know each other. So even if you may not be able to personally like jump in and respond to what we're saying, you can at least hear what we're saying and see like, okay, I can kind of understand and maybe learn a little bit of where, you know, the black community is coming from, where the Hispanic community is coming from. So yeah, in the future, yeah, we definitely should have more diversity, but even with this being a not so diverse panel, you can still always learn, because again, you can sit at home as a white person and see, okay, now granted we don't represent all black people, but this is, you know, kind of a little bit of a thought process that they have. So something can always be learned from it.
And most federal polls say that most white people in this country believe we've come a long way toward taking care of racism in about a 2-to-1 ratio from whites to blacks. So, you know, that's why you're here to answer the questions that we need answers so we can clear this thing up. How about you, Mr. Crump?
I thought it was an excellent observation. I absolutely think we need everybody at the table talking. And I, quite frankly, want to hear more moderate white people speak up. I think, as Patricia said, we have these fringe groups on social media saying all kind of racist, hateful things, and you don't hear from the moderate people speaking up who have children who say, this is just wrong. When I watched the video of Tamir Rice, somebody come up on a playground that is predominantly minority, and in 1.7 seconds shoot the kid, and you say, if this was in my community, I wouldn't want my police to do this. So you're searching for those voices, the person in the middle. You're going to have on either race. You got black people who are extreme racists, white people who are extreme racist. You're never going to convince them of anything. You want to talk to the person in the middle who says, I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to do the right thing. I'm trying to be a good person, because it's those people that give us hope. And hopefully they will speak up and they will start to influence people who live in their communities, who work with them at their jobs, who go to them at their schools and their colleges, and speak on these issues. Because as I conclude, the reality is, it's very unlikely that a young white person is going to be stopped by a police officer and treated like a black or Hispanic kid. They can't fathom that their unarmed child really would be killed by somebody who's supposed to protect and serve them. And so we have to educate them. And the whole Trayvon Martin historical piece was that the social media people made the major media talk about it, and that's when you saw them talk about Kendrick Johnson. You saw them talk about Michael Brown, because before that the media had just said when they kill black people. And literally, when I first started trying to get people to cover Trayvon Martin case, they said another black person was killed. Why are we going to cover that, Ben? And I mean, I'm begging my friends in the media. They saying, okay, what's newsworthy about that? But it was the social media and good people like yourself coming forward that said all life matters, and now we're advancing the conversation.
Patricia Guadalupe.
I'm going to absolutely agree with Mr. Crump, and to say what I've been saying before is that, you know, take advantage of the fact that you have access to the internet and to the social media and to places that may not be nearby, but the internet brings everybody together. And so even though there are a lot of negative people on there, there are a lot of positive people trying to do a lot of move the conversation forward and make a change. And look at it as almost like an enormous town hall meeting where you can get involved in pushing these stories out there that people need to know about. But if you don't get involved, then how are they going to know?
Dr. Ben Carson, the only way we're going to move forward in this is with solutions. What do you think about solutions? What are some of your solutions?
Well, I think I've already mentioned we have to create environments where people get to know each other, where people get to interact in a situation that's different from a confrontation. And I think that will make an enormous difference. I think education of the community is very, very important. And I've said this many times, a lot of the young black men who are growing up in these inner city neighborhoods grow up in single parent homes where there is no father figure no one to teach them how to relate to authority. The first time they really run into authority, it may be a police officer or it may be someone who's badder than they are in the neighborhood. In either case, it turns out to be a disaster for them. We need to figure out ways that we can fix that. I was speaking at an organization a couple of weeks ago, and people would adopt these very same boys that I'm talking about, bring them into their families, pay for them to be in private schools, and virtually all of those boys were graduating from high school and going on to college and making something of themselves. So we as a society need to get involved.
All right, so let's say since Dr. Martin Luther King's speech, I Had a Dream speech in 1963, and I'm going to talk to all four of you panelists about this before we say goodnight. Patricia, I'm going to start with you. Have we come forward when it comes to the problem of racism in this country? Have we come a lot? Have we come some? But are we moving in the right direction?
Well, I mean, I think that we've obviously made progress. I mean, looking at the way race issues are covered, I mean, looking at Martin Luther King's speech when he said it, I mean, the Washington Post didn't even pay attention to it as much, and they actually ended up apologizing. But at the time that that was going on, my parents were living in Washington, D.C. at the time, and my mother wanted to go to listen to the speech, but there had been so much negative publicity about it, and with some members of the media at the time, and even law enforcement and local authorities that expected, because the majority of the people that were going to be there were going to be African American, that it was going to turn into something terrible. And to this day, she regrets not going to see the speech because it turned out to be something historic. But that's how it was portrayed at the time. And that particular situation continues to this day. We've made progress, but we have to be more proactive in, like I said earlier, you know, complaining about coverage, talking about the positive things and complimenting coverage when it's good, trying to bring out the good stories, but also being very forceful about how you don't like how something was portrayed on television or in a newspaper or on radio, and not just look at it and go, well, here we go again, but actually make those calls, write those emails, be very proactive about it so that we can move the conversation forward in a way that we weren't able to back then when we didn't have access to a lot of the ways to do that.
Dr. Ben Carson, some of the video that I've seen as a child that I grew up with on the nightly news was scarier than heck, because I remember the civil rights movement. Do you feel as though we've come very far in trying to solve the problem with racism in this country? Or do you feel, sir, that we have a long, long way to go?
We've made enormous progress. And, but I will say that a person who is looking for racism will see racism. If you meet somebody and everybody's convinced you that this is a racist person, everything they say you will interpret, yeah, they're racist. And if someone has convinced you that this is a kind-hearted, wonderful person, you'll say, wow, they're a kind-hearted, wonderful person. You tend to see what you're looking for. But we have made a lot of progress, but we still have progress to make, and I think we're making it. And this is kind of the thing that needs to be done.
Benjamin Crump, you had a pretty busy year last year. How do you feel about the advancement of racism of this country and how far we have to go?
Well, I certainly think we've made progress, but we have farther to go. And Martin Luther King, you know, we all remember the man and we celebrate him and stuff, but we got to remember what he was doing. As Patricia said, America was upset about it. They called him a race baiter, a communist. I mean, they hated him. And so now,
including J. Edgar Hoover.
J. Edgar Hoover and other members of the government. But we then condemn the young people who are doing just what Martin Luther King did in the 60s, and we call them problems and thugs, and they're doing exactly what Dr. King did. So we have a long way to go, and I think in conclusion, what we really have to do is get the thought leaders to sit at the table, have some kind of foundation. We talked about all this police brutality, and we have to come up with real solutions to say, first of all, we're going to reset the conversation. As Dr. Carter said, let's look for positive, but also let's acknowledge the problem, because I don't want to go through life with kaleidoscope glasses because my children keep dying. I want to go through life being very real, saying there's good in America and there's bad in America. Let's see if we can get more good and weed out the bad.
All right. Well, Dr. Martin Luther King was a peace advocate, and he put up with a lot during some very volatile times in the history of our country. I don't think anybody appreciates the scenes of riots. I don't care what color you are. I don't care what age you are. It's not an enjoyable thing to look at. And it would be very interesting to me to see how Dr. King would react to some of the reactions. The anger, he may understand. The way in which that anger is being taken out may be a little different than what Dr. King did. Now, Frederick, I saved you for last, buddy. So I used to pick on you first, but I'm saving you for last. How far does this nation have to go in eradicating as much racism as possible? And do you think, because in your video you also said, I don't think there'll ever be a 100% country that racism has been eradicated and it's extinct like the dinosaurs. But how could we get closer to having the majority of people and the majority of races getting along and not dealing with these horrible, horrible images that we saw all last year in 2014, and let's just pray we don't see it in 2015. How do you feel about this?
All right, well, yes, I don't think that racism will ever completely go away, because again, as Mr. Crump pointed out, you're always going to have those people that are extreme, but we got to deal with the middle. And then with dealing with the middle, again, as I like to point out again, the common theme that we've all been talking about is understanding. A lot of times we're quick to call somebody racist, and they may not be racist, they may just be like ignorant in the pure sense of the world. They just don't know. Like if you're like myself, situation. If you put me in a Korean household right now, I'm probably going to say and do some things that are going to be like, whoa, what do you, I just don't know a lot about their culture.
I'd like to see that, though, if you don't mind.
Depending on what they have for dinner. So yeah, I think the way to move us forward is going to be just through continued education, like getting to know each other, again, coming together in issues that aren't always negative, again, like getting the police officers together with the community before something happens. Don't wait till a child is dead. Don't wait till this happens. Get together before. Talk, hey, you know, what's going on in your community that we can help you with? And the people in the community, hey, you know, what kind of things are you guys seeing from us that you need work with us? So that way when you come in there to police our communities to help serve and protect us, you can do a better job. Again, as long as we just need to get together and communicate and learn more about each other. And again, if you encounter somebody and they do something that's incorrect, don't just be quick to label them a racist. Because I think one of the key terms of racism is hate. So if they say something with hatred, okay, that might be racism. But if they just say something because they literally just do not know that what they said was the wrong thing or offensive, educate them. Be like, hey, you know what? I'm not sure what you meant by what you said, but this is how it would come across to somebody in my position. And they could be like, okay, you know, I didn't realize that, you know, saying that word or saying that phrase or doing this was offensive. And again, right there, you just solved the problem. You put somebody on a different path, whereas you could be like, hey, man, you're racist. Now you've attacked them, they're going to attack you back. So now you might have a heated conversation when it could have just been a quick little, hey, you know, again, just redirect.
That perception could have come from racism or profound ignorance or insecurity.
Exactly. So, and I've seen a quote where it says, like, a lot of conversations, it's 10% what you say and 90% tone.
Oh, sure. So yeah, it's all about the presentation. Well, I want to thank you very much for being with us. Can we have a big round of applause for our panel members tonight? And talking about this, to me, is the only way of just getting the cards on the table and talking about it is the only way to move forward in trying to eradicate racism as much as we possibly can in this country. I want to thank Dr. Ben Carson, Benjamin Crump, Frederick Wilson, and Patricia Guadalupe. You have been so gracious to stay with us for the last 90 minutes. Thank you very, very much for being with us. And we'll talk. You're welcome back anytime.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you
we
for
certainly
having me.
appreciate it. That'll do it for us. That's all the time we have. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's Town Hall meeting. Have a great night, everybody. Take care.